Oh my gosh, folks, it's finally time. It's finally time to do responsive styles in your favorite recipe. We've come so far, and it took so much just to get this little itty bitty mobile view style. But now our challenge is to translate those styles from the mobile view up to the desktop view. And today I'm not going to show you the whole thing. I want you to kind of figure out some of these for yourself. I am going to focus on layout and positioning in directions, because as I look at this, this is kind of the most complicated piece here. I know if I look at this that I can change the way that this relationship works, and this relationship works with my ingredients heading and my list with a couple different methods that we've already seen plenty of times. Either absolute or relative positioning, floats, like, I've got some options there. But directions, now this is hard. We haven't really talked about this. How do we get things to sort of sit nicely in this kind of grid format and be equal heights? So let's get started. Let's see, let's try a couple different approaches to get that working. And for right now, I'm going to keep in mind that at the tablet view, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say, okay, mobile, I've got that done. Mobile first. But at tablet, what size is this? I forget. Let's just like click and see what the artboard size is. Okay, at 768 pixels. You can even copy that just for your reference. Keep that number in mind. That's your magic number right now. You're going to start styling for 768 pixels, and you're going to change this relationship of cards on directions at that time. So how do we do that? Hopefully you've watched some of the other videos and you are ready to go with some of these ideas. Remember, how do we write a media query? How do we change what things look like? And we're just going to show this in a new window now, because this is just a little difficult to see here. So here's our mobile thing. Oh, this is a disaster, but let's kind of put this in its own spot. Let's even use responsive design mode using this little tab here in Firefox. Chrome has a similar sort of feature. And let's change this to iPad. We're going to style for the iPad now. Oh, it's not looking so great, but we're going to focus on directions. And just keep this in the back of our minds. This is what's happening. This is our CSS over here. All right, well, first of all, I can't handle, we need to fix this background here. This background's supposed to go all the way down, and it's just not doing the thing, and ingredients is doing something wacky. So back here, we used a special trick with floats to get this overlapping thing to work, but now it's just kind of working against us. So when we switch to 768, I want this to do something different. So let's see, can I remember where that was? It was probably in recipe. Let's see if we can find it. I'm just going down the tree, seeing where we might have put this. I'm just going to look for a float. Here we go, recipe ingredients list, float left. If I take that out, it starts behaving exactly as I think it will. So let's start there. Let's add a special rule to recipe ingredients list that changes how it floats at 768 pixels. We're going to write at media screen and min dash width starting at 768 pixels. No semicolon there. I always make that mistake. Float, none. We're going to override that float left. And now we can see, if we refresh this, oh, you know what? Is it because of this? Ha! So that's kind of funny. Do you see what happened there? The minimum width had to be 768 pixels, and it was like not realizing that it was 768 pixels. Okay, so we floated none it. That's working a lot more like we expect. Now we want all of this direction section, this whole entire section, to have that teal background. And that's not something we did before, I don't think. So let's take a look. Here's our recipe directions cards. Here's recipe directions. Recipe directions has the background color, but recipe directions cards is not getting the background. Let's try removing the margin here. There we go, now we can see it. So now when we get to recipe directions cards, we're gonna just remove that margin. So again, this is all about overriding the CSS you don't want at each breakpoint. So recipe directions cards. And at this point I am just, I'm kind of doing this based at a certain breakpoint, but you can always adjust these values to whatever you want. So if I might go back and during testing realize that I want that to start a little earlier, that's totally fine. Oh, you know what? What did I do wrong here? Why is this not applying? I don't have, I did the same thing up here. What did I miss? I just put this rule right into this media query, but where does this rule go with? What is it? Who does it belong with? It belongs with recipe ingredients list. Did I say it belongs with recipe ingredients list? No, because you know, I expect the computer to know everything. So that's a thing. Make sure that, just double check if you're having trouble with these media queries, make sure you've actually written the class selector in there, because that's going to be very important in making sure things actually apply like you think they're going to. All right, so that was recipe ingredients list. Good, we've got the right selector in there. And here we need one for, let's write it out. Dot recipe directions cards. And then just put this right up. You know why I forget that? I'm spoiled by SAS. SAS actually lets you write these in line, which means like right underneath, like inside the rule. So that's why I'm having a little trouble remembering here. All right, so we're getting further. We've got our kind of border around things. And now we want these cards to stack in a 2x2 layout. And we're going to deal with the directions last. For right now, I just want to try and get these cards to sit next to each other. So I'm going to show you this 3 different ways, and you'll see kind of why I picked the final way when we get to it. But let's start with the way we know. We could say each of these recipe direction card, each one, we could give a width of 50%. So let's see what that looks like. There we go, much closer. And we could float it left. And that would kind of do it. So look at, this isn't quite what we want, right? Things are kind of all over the place. Our numbers are like not where we expect them to be anymore. See how when some of these are just like a little bit taller than others, like see how this one, this first one here is a little bit taller than this one, and that means that this one just, you gotta zoom in real close. Let me zoom in here so you can see. But see how there's just like 2 pixels of space there, and now this one is like getting stuck there? Well, that's not good. That's not what we want. Let's put this back to 100%, and this one we will increase. This is how floats behave. They will kind of float left as long as there's not other content in the way. But this content's in the way. And so some old tricks that we used to use to kind of get around this would be like a min height of, I don't know, 400 pixels. And like that like kind of, that doesn't even do it yet. It's just not great. Okay, that does it, but then like what happens when you have a really tall one, they're not equal size. Like that's closer, but it's not it's not really what we want. It's just, plus there's no space in between them. So, all right, let's just say that right now we've decided this is too much work because we know there's a better way out there. If you remember one of our earlier videos where we went over in a very high level what layout options we had floats, which are, and let's just kind of open that back up in CodePen here, just to kind of see. So what I have, let's see. Right, we had this. So floats, where content bends to content. We had flexbox, where the layout bends to content. Then grid, where content bends to layout. So in our recipe for disaster, how do we want this to work? Well, let's try flexbox next. Flexbox, you have to set it on the container, not the item. So if we do like, if we were to do a display flex over here, display flex on our recipe directions card, see how that's not doing anything? Actually, it's just making our images really gross. Yeah, that doesn't help us out. We want that actually up on recipe directions cards. In fact, we only want that starting at the 768 pixels. So let's add it here. Display flex, and just see what happens. Oh, not quite. So remember how flex, the kind of naturally speaking, the layout tries to adapt to the content? That's what's happening here. The layout is saying, oh, you've got eight of these in a row. Let me try and make this 8 of these in a row wide. And now it's kind of just trying to shove them all on one line. Now you can get around this. You can do a flex wrap. This says that when something goes outside the limits of the container, wrap it, make it go to the next line, kind of like a text wrap. That's better. This is closer. But what if I want some margin in between these? So like margin 1em. You know, what if I want some room? Well, now they're all like, I have to adjust the width because the margin is taking up space, and it's okay. There's a better way. I promise. So that's how flex works. You could use flex. With flex, you have to define, and flex wrap, you have to define a width to make it work. Otherwise, it'll just take up 100% of the space, or it will try and make the content fit in the space. Here, this looks a little neater, but again, it's not really what we want. We want more control over where these pieces land in a specific layout. We want to control the layout. So what do we want to use when we want to control the layout? What layout behavior do we like? We like grid. We want the content to bend to that layout. We know that we want a 2-up layout. So here we're going to put display grid. And this is going to do absolutely nothing. Watch it do absolutely nothing. Nothing. It doesn't know what to do yet. We can even take off of the recipe directions card. Let's take the margin off. With grid, you can set the space in between each of these items really easily. So with grid, we want to say grid template columns. We know how many columns we want, right? What's a column? You remember from CM523, right? Or 501 if you've taken that. Column is like one of these, like see how there's 2 columns here? Well, that's what we want. We want 2 columns. And if you put grid template column, and I'm always forgetting the grid syntax. CSS grid template columns. I just like to Google it sometimes. MDN developer.mozilla.org is like perfect. So here it's just saying that you can use a bunch of different things. And I like repeat. Repeat says go as far as you need, how many, and then how far. So let's do repeat. We want this to be a repeating set of columns, 2. And then we're going to use a special unit type, 1FR. That's 1 fraction. So 2 columns, each 1 fraction of those columns. Oh, you know what? I missed a spot. Grid template column, grid template columns. Always be checking your property. Make sure you got it right. Check that out. That's looking good. Oh, excellent. Okay. All right, so what do we want to do next? Let's specify the grid, the gap in between items, the space in between items. What's that property? Grid gap. Let's say we want it to be 10 pixels. Check that out, so easy. And look, everything's even like really nice and equally spaced and aligned. How lovely. Now these numbers aren't sitting where I want them to, but we'll figure that out later. This is like almost where I want it. You know, the only thing that's not quite working as expected is this enjoy. So with Firefox, you can actually see how this has like a grid on it. And let's just let's kind of get this out of the way. Let's just look at the CSS for now. Well, we'll look at the HTML because it makes it a little easier. So see how this has a grid model? Click on that, and then it'll bring you right to it. And then this display grid, you can click it to toggle the highlight. So now you can see kind of with these little dotted lines where the grid is falling. So this enjoy, this last one, is trying to fit into 1 column. Recipe directions end. But what if we really want it to fit into 2 columns? Well, you can do that in grid. You can say, I want you to span 2 columns. So let me see if I can remember. Grid dash column span 2, maybe? Check that out. I remembered it. And now it's spanning 2 columns. It's taking up that space. So that's exactly what we want. It's a little bigger. That's because this image is like kind of larger than it needs to be right now. But we want to be able to position it to like that entire grid. So recipe directions end at this screen size. Let's hop down over here, recipe directions end. So writing our media query at media screen and min width. I'm always accidentally writing max width, and that's not the case. Min width, remember we're working at 768 pixels. We want recipe directions end, this particular thing, to do something different with our columns. So grid column span 2. So when it's in grid and looking at the columns, I want you to behave by spanning 2 of the columns. That's what that says. And now we have that spanning the whole way. So what's great about this, now this is like way close. This is almost exactly what we want. Oh, it turns out we didn't actually want that to span 2 columns just yet. We want that to wait until this 3rd option. So let's hop over to small desktop and see what this is. This is 1200 pixels. At 1200 pixels, we want this to have 3 columns. So how do we do that in our CSS? Well, it's as simple as under recipe direction cards, writing another media query at media screen, and make sure you actually write screen, and min width. And I'm just going to paste in my value, 1200. Oh, make sure you put your pixels in, pixels. And now we only need to overwrite one of these rules. We're only changing one piece of this. We don't need to say it needs to be grid again. We don't need to redefine the grid gap or any of that. We've already done that. It's going to cascade. So here we're just going to say we want 3 of the columns. Did it do anything here yet? No, because this isn't large enough. We have to increase the size. So let's just change this to 1200. Let's see if This is being a little finicky about applying the correct styles, I'm noticing. Maybe it's because we're not at 100% width, 1205. Did I get this right? Min width, 1200 pixels, grid template columns. Why aren't you? Ha! Oh my gosh, I'm always forgetting this. Look at this. I didn't say where to put it. How's it supposed to know? How's it supposed to know without that? You gotta be really careful with that. Make sure you always have this rule here. I'm gonna be constantly messing this up and constantly showing you how to fix it, clearly. All right, let's take a look. Ah, much better. There's our 3 columns. And this is now going across 2 columns. Now, is that really what we want? No, we kind of want it to be like one. It looks like we really want it to be 1 column, but like shifted 1 over. So how could we do that? Well, what's happening here is that we kind of thought that we needed this for our tablet size, but it turns out we don't. So we're going to start this at 1200 pixels, and then we're going to change this rule a little bit. I want this rule to say, instead of spanning 2, I just want this to start at a different place. I want the grid column to start at 2. Let's see what that looks like. That ought to work. Ah, and there we go. That's looking much better. That's looking much more like what I expected. So there you go. That's how you get a responsive layout. Now I'm going to pop out of responsive view here. I'm going to show this in a new window. And I'm just going to show you kind of that whole piece and show you how those change across breakpoints. So see, you've got 1 column, 2 columns, 3 columns. Look how nice that feels. As you get into your desktop styles, you might say, oh, I want like a max width on this. This is like really big, you know? Like, I don't know if I like that. Sometimes I like putting a max width on things. So here, maybe, and you can even put this on mobile. You don't have to write a whole media query for this, because max widths are kind of like, you know, they're max widths. So at 320 pixels, you're not going to have a max width of 1200. Let's just kind of play this out. Recipe directions cards. Let's say that we want a max width of 1200 pixels. Yeah, that's looking good. And then one easy way to center things like this is just to do margin 0 auto. So always give that a try when you want to center like a block. Try margin 0 auto. It's usually what you want. All right, so I'm going to take these 2, max width, pop them into my recipe directions cards, LM. I like to alphabetize. And here, now we should see. I'm going to do a margin 0 auto. Where's my margin 0 auto? Oh, you know what? It's because I overwrote it here. Margin 0 auto. And I didn't want that up here. I know, because I put the margin like that. So those are some of the things to watch out for. Like, are you overriding CSS that you need to override, you know? Is there stuff you're maybe unintentionally doing? But see how nice that layout looks? Not bad, not bad. So that's actually, that's not bad at all. Remember to use different layout types, right? Use the layout that's appropriate for your CSS and for your mockup. So in this case, directions, grid was a great use because I wanted these evenly spaced cards and I wanted them all to be even heights. But for the top of my recipe for disaster, I might use like absolute positioning or floats or something like that. Try each one and see, try and remember what each one does, what each one's good at, and then choose the most appropriate one from there. So, you know, try and keep through those things. If you can't get it, that's okay. That's what code reviews are for. I will review your code and I will help you determine which ones are the best. But the only way you can start is just by giving it a try and seeing what happens. So with that, I'm going to finalize my recipe for disaster mock-up, and I think it's a great time for you to do so too. I'll see you later.